Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my experience at university. So if you're new here, hello, welcome, I'm Beth. And I keep saying this. I keep saying I just graduated, or I graduated recently. It's been a whole year now, so I'm kind of coming to the terms with the fact that I can't be like, yeah, I'm a recent graduate and I'm now just like officially an adult who needs to sort her life out, maybe. Anyway, a year ago now, I graduated from Southampton, so I have a maths degree, a first class maths degree, and I would like to talk about how that was for me. Less in terms of the actual mathsy content, because I know that's not for everybody, although I could make a separate video about that kind of stuff, but I want to talk more about the experience, the 3 years of my life that I was at university, because if you've been here for those 3 years, you'll know that it's been a bit of a rocky time. But I want to talk about it all. It's been a year and I haven't really spoken about it. It's a massive part of my life. It's 3 years. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. Now, if you haven't already seen it, the last video I uploaded was kind of my story about how I chose which uni to go to and how I eventually ended up going to Southampton. So if you're interested in that, I'll link it in the cards up there for you, but you don't have to watch it if you don't want to. You can just watch this one instead, that's fine. If you haven't watched that video, all you really need to know is that I went to Southampton. My boyfriend, who I've been with since the first year of college, also went to Southampton, but he didn't go to the uni of Southampton. He went to Southampton Solent University. So we were both moving to Southampton at the same time, but I was very clear from the beginning that when we moved in, I didn't want to see each other for a while so that we could both settle in, find our own groups of friends, and our lives weren't like completely dependent on each other. I moved there, I actually remember the date, it was the 19th of September 2015. And I was living in Halls. If you're familiar with Southampton or you may be going there this year, I was living in Glen. There's Wessex Lane and Glen Eyre, which are really big like complexes of halls where there's lots of different buildings and there's like common areas and stuff like that. Glen Eyre was really nice because it had a lot of open green spaces where you could have barbecues and stuff in the summer. I knew in advance which halls I was going to be in, but I didn't really know much more than that, and I think I found a couple of different flatmates who I was going to be with on Facebook. The reason why I couldn't find that many people is that I was in like the oldest block in Glen Eyre. I think it had 14 bedrooms, so that was, the whole building had 14 people in it, which was why I couldn't really find that many people on Facebook. I think I was the last one to move in that day. I think I arrived at about 6 o'clock or something. It was quite late. I really wanted to get there early because, you know, I'm very anxious, and meeting new people, I prefer to have a bit of time to kind of settle myself in, unpack my stuff, and then a bit more time to actually meet the people that I'm going to be living with for the next year. But that ended up not happening, which was a shame. And everybody else, it felt like they already knew each other or a bit more comfortable with each other, whereas I was the new girl. I really don't like rushing things, so being there as early as possible if you're moving in soon, I think that's a good tip if you're a bit anxious, because then you can just have a little bit of time to get yourself settled and you won't feel like you're the last person there and you're kind of latching on to everybody else and infiltrating their little group, which it wasn't what was happening, but it kind of felt like that to me as a very anxious person. The moving process, although it was very rushed, was fine. For some reason, I got this massive room. There were 14 rooms in my building and they were on 2 floors, so I was 207, so I was like the second floor, right at the end of the corridor, around the corner where the toilet is. That was where my room was. Yay! I can't really describe to you how big it is, but there's a room tour video on my channel, I'll link it in the cards again, which will just show like how big it was. There was just so much open space, which I didn't like, there was no furniture to fill that much space, but it was very nice. It was a nice luxury to have this giant room because I was expecting a little cupboard box room. I think I settled in okay. I'd always been quite an independent person and I never really been that attached to my family, no offense to them, but like my parents have been split up my whole life basically, so I've always been between my mum's house and my dad's house, used to moving around, living out of a suitcase, and I never really spent that much time with my family before moving to uni. It wasn't like they were a huge part of my life. This sounds all really horrible. I don't mean it in a bad way. I just mean like before I moved to uni, I was at college and I would be gone from like 7:30 in the morning till 6:30 at night. We didn't really see each other loads, so it wasn't like the transition wasn't too difficult in terms of missing my family, although I did miss them a little bit and I went back to see them. I think I went back after 3 weeks for a weekend to visit my mum. I enjoyed having my own space. I enjoyed being able to decorate my room a little bit and make it my own and just have my own life. I really enjoyed that. Where I did struggle a bit was with the socialising. I am a very introverted person. I'm not shy, I just like my own company. I find socialising drains me. I just would prefer to be on my own a lot of the time. Doesn't mean like I don't want to be around people, sometimes I do, but I also value my own time, and that's like really precious to me, and it's also really good for like my brain. I just like being on my own. You're obviously expected to socialise, and I tried my best, I really did, and I didn't want to isolate myself and seem like I wasn't interested in being these people's friends, because I was. Freshers Week was always going to be a little bit of a struggle, not just because of the socialising, but the kind of partying aspect. The idea of going to a club is probably one of the worst ways you can spend an evening. I like to drink, I like to socialise, I like to party a little bit, but clubbing is not for me. Like, I don't like loud music. I don't listen to the kind of music they play in clubs. I just listen to like rock and metal, so I didn't really know any of the music was going on, but I did go out a couple of times. I did try my best to just embrace it. Freshers Week only lasts a week. I think actually on the first night, the night I moved in, so I think this was the Saturday, everyone in my flat went out, and I was too anxious and I just couldn't go. I just wanted to stay on my own and get myself settled, and that's completely fine. There's no pressure to go out if you don't want to. If anyone's moving to uni soon, don't feel like you have to go out. But I wanted to make the effort because I wanted to make friends. But there are lots of other ways that you can make friends. You can join societies, you can go to like daytime events, and just living in your flat in general, you become close with your flatmates. The people who I lived with in first year were all so lovely, and I did get on with them really well, but I think they were a lot closer as a group than I was with them. I think part of it was just that they were more sociable people. Part of it was that I was doing a very heavy, intensive course because I was in the first year maths, and there was a lot of stuff. Like even in Freshers Week, I was in uni every day doing like pre-lectures. I wanted to set myself up to do well for the year, so I was going to all these events that the maths department were putting on. They have a good budget to put on a nice little buffet at the end of it. So if you're going to Southampton and you fancy some free food, I recommend going to the Maths Student Centre at the end of Freshers Week, because there's a lot of good food. I guess the other thing I really found difficult was the massive jump between A-level maths and university maths. I remember my first lecture, I came out of it and I just thought, what the fuck have I got myself into? I felt so drained just from being in there for an hour. My head hurt. In that lecture, we essentially covered the whole of FP4, which is one of the further maths modules at A-level, in an hour, and that was content that I was already familiar with. So how was I going to cope when there was new content coming on? Like, it just shocked me. It really took me aback how much of a jump there was just straight away. You didn't really get eased into it. Saying that, I don't want to put anybody off going to uni to do maths, because I did adjust to it. It was just a huge shock to the system at first. I don't think anything can actually ever prepare you for that first lecture. Like, you could expect it to be hard, but after the hour your brain will hurt, and it's just something that you've got to you just got to adapt to it. You do adapt to it. Like, your brain is very good at doing that. So that horrible feeling of like, what have I done? Why am I doing this? Why am I here? That doesn't last forever. Hi, this is Beth from the future. So the footage you're about to see is super blurry. I'm going to refilm some stuff, but I don't want to have to refilm the bit I'm about to talk about, because essentially it's very emotionally draining and I don't want to put myself through it twice. So if you just bear with me for this slightly out of focus bit until we get to the end of first year, and then I'll come back and I'll talk you through second and third year. There's very little computational maths. It's very heavily theory based. Like, it's almost 100% theory. You literally have to prove every little step you're doing. It's just not something that you're used to. It's not something you're prepared for. Actually, I think now you might be prepared for it a little bit more, because I've been tutoring the new A-level spec and there's a lot more kind of theory and proof involved in it. But when I was doing it 4 years ago now, yeah, wow, that was a big jump. It was a huge jump. I didn't particularly enjoy first year in terms of the content that we were doing. Like, the content was interesting, but I think the jump and the way that we were lectured in first year was just, it was too intense. I made some great friends in first year, and this is the tactic to doing well in a maths degree. You have to have some great friends who are also doing a maths degree, and you have to sit down together for hours on end and just try and work through some sheets. Hopefully between you, all of your ideas can kind of combine together and get the answer to a question. So in the first week of like pre-lectures, so this was during Freshers Week, one of the big positive things that came out of it is that I met Juliet. I was kind of hovering outside a lecture room waiting to go in for one of these like introductory lectures, just kind of introducing you to the university, and she was like, are you doing maths? Is this the right place for this room? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And then we became friends. We started talking, basically latched onto each other for the rest of Freshers Week, and then when we started lectures we had each other to kind of sit and talk through all these questions with, and then kind of expanded our group. And that is probably the sole reason that I managed to survive first year, honestly. Because as hard as it was to begin with, it got a lot worse. My life turned upside down, and I should not have put makeup on to film this video because there will probably be a couple of tears. As I mentioned, I moved to Southampton essentially with my boyfriend, who I'd been with for like a year and a bit when we moved to university. And even though we didn't base our lives like around each other at Southampton, we had our own groups of friends, we were at different universities, we like had separate lives, but we did see each other. It felt like there was a nice balance between my new uni friends and my kind of college relationship and that group of friends as well. Again, if you're new around here, I struggled really badly with my mental health up to sort of age 16, and then my years in college were kind of like a new start for me, and everything started getting a lot better. So I'd been working so hard on my recovery for the last 2 years. In the last year of college, I came off all my medication and I was just so happy. And then it came to university and it felt like that person was gone and I was back in my old ways. And I had worked so hard on getting to that place in the first place, and it just suddenly slipped for no specific reason. Like there was nothing that I had done differently that meant my recovery had been like compromised. It just happened. So I was struggling a little bit with my mood, not majorly, like I was okay, but it was something that was going on in the back of my head. And at the same time, Jacob was going to all these doctor's appointments because he had found a lump on his, stop to have a little cry, it made me sound like I couldn't say the word, testicle. He found a lump on his testicle. This is all quite traumatic for me, as you can probably tell, so I think I've blocked quite a lot of it out. From what I remember, they thought it was an infection and they gave him some antibiotics, which he was taking for a while to reduce this swelling, and I think they put him on 2 different courses of that because the first one didn't work and he went back to the doctor again and they were like, it's definitely not cancer. They literally said those words. They gave him some more antibiotics and again nothing really happened, so they decided to send him for some like tests and some scans at the general hospital. So I went with him for that. I think it was an ultrasound that they did. I didn't go into the room, I just waited outside, but they couldn't see anything wrong. Like they saw this lump, but they said it didn't look cancerous. Everything felt okay again for a while, and every so often I would go into this big mood dip again because something would come up with Jacob's health and I was like, oh God, what if it is cancer? But every time he went to see some kind of health professional, they were like, no, it's not cancer, and I would feel okay again. He just kept getting sent for more and more tests, and every time they were saying there's nothing wrong, they couldn't see anything wrong. And then suddenly, the one time that I didn't go, I'd moved back home for Christmas at this point. I think it was the 16th of December, and I was at my friend McKinley's house, and Jacob had this appointment for another scan or another test. I got this text that was like, it's cancer. And I wasn't really expecting it, and I didn't really know what to do. So this whole process leading up to this diagnosis was so slow, and then within 2 days there was an operation to chop it off. And luckily with testicular cancer, it's in an organ which is quite easy to just kind of remove. They're not essential for survival and they're kind of external, so they're nice and easy to just get rid of. Maybe Jacob has a different take on this because he was the one being cut into, but it felt like there was quite a lot of hope because it seemed as if they thought it hadn't spread anywhere and everything would go back to normal. So that operation happened just before Christmas. That was literally the most miserable Christmas of my life, just waiting to see whether it had worked or not. Deep down I guess I just thought it had, because why wouldn't it have worked? But literally the day I moved back to Southampton, Jacob had this test or a scan, it might have been a CT scan, I can't remember. And I remember I was just waiting for his text to see how it went because I was in a lecture. I should have gone with him really, I don't know why I didn't. I can't remember what it said, but it was like, essentially it said, it's spread, I've got to have chemo, I'm gonna lose all my hair. And I just wasn't prepared for that. And I didn't know what to do, so I just left. I left the lecture and I went to Jacob and we just watched Finding Nemo. I can't remember exactly the timeline because, like I said, I've blocked most of it out. But Jacob moved home because they wanted him to be with his family, so Jacob was gone. He just moved back home and I was left all alone in Southampton. Didn't know whether to drop out or not. I really considered it for a long time because I was obviously not in a good mental state and I wanted to be there for him. We got into this new routine where I would have my weeks in Southampton studying. I would do as much as I possibly could during the week, and then I would get the train home on a Friday back to Jacob's house, and I would spend the weekend there, either at the hospital, but most of the time he didn't have chemo on the weekends, so he was just in bed. I don't really want to go into too much more, but he had this chemo treatment for a course of something like 12 weeks. And I was there at the weekends trying to do what I could, either to have a little bit of like a break from medical stuff and try and do something fun, but most of the time it was just spending the day in bed, maybe watching a film, but we couldn't really do much more than that. And I'm obviously really glad I did, but it did mean that I didn't really develop any of my friendships that much because I was never in Southampton. People would do things on the weekends and I wasn't there, and if people were doing things in the week, I was trying my best to catch up with all the work so that I didn't have to do it at the weekend. So I definitely isolated myself a lot for the rest of first year, and I couldn't have been that fun to be around because no one really wants to be around sad people. He's now been in remission for 3 years. Everything seems to be going okay. Regular appointments at the hospital to check, but so far so good. Despite all of that going on, I somehow managed to do really well. I think I ended the year with something like 78 as my average, which is a high-ish first. I mean, I was spending quite a lot of time doing the work during the week, but I wasn't fully engaging with it. I was just doing it to get it done so that I could focus on everything else that was going on in my life. So I think that's more or less my first year summed up. Obviously a lot more happened than that, but I mean the cancer stuff stands out a lot more than anything else. So now we'll get back to normal uni life and I'll talk a bit more about slightly happier things. Hello, it's me again. So let's move on to talk about my second year now. So second year for me, I don't know, it was a bit of a strange year. I was less into the academic stuff. I think everything that had happened in first year had just put me in this really depressive state, and as much as I was like trying to make the most of things and trying to get involved in things and throw myself back into uni life, I was just a bit depressed, and I think that reflected in my work, in my grades. For second year I moved in with 2 of my friends from maths, Julia and Amy, and we lived in a flat that was kind of halfway between the city centre and the uni. Glen Eyre, which was the halls I lived in, was so far out. It was close to campus, but it was so far out from anything else, so it was really nice to be able to just go into the city whenever I wanted to. I had my bike that year, so I would cycle to uni, I could cycle into the city, I could cycle to Jacob's, because at this point Jacob had rejoined uni, he started his first year again. I tried to throw myself into things and get myself doing things other than academic stuff. So I went back to the Feminist Society, which I hadn't been to since Jacob had left uni because I just didn't have time for that kind of thing. I signed up to be a mentor for first year students. I ran a crafts fair stall because in second year is when I started my Etsy store. I just thought, why not? I'm gonna have a stall at this craft fair that was on campus, and I was like super excited. I spent so long preparing for it, making all this stock, and it was the week that everybody had already gone home for Christmas, so I made a total of £27. That wasn't even a profit, that was just takings, so not the most successful thing, but I'm really glad that I gave it a go. I did some travelling. I went to Dublin with Jacob, I went to France with Jacob and his family, and I went to Berlin with Sophie, and I actually missed one of my class tests because I went to Berlin, which wasn't the most sensible thing to do, and I wouldn't recommend it to people, but I had a good time and I still passed my modules, so I have no regrets really. I did miss a lot of lectures because of my mental health in second year, and because I wasn't in a good place, I wasn't really motivated to catch up in my own time either, so I didn't fall behind, but I wasn't learning as effectively as I could be because I often was like leaving things to the last minute, which obviously isn't the most effective way to learn. I still did really well for second year. I got 69, which I was really happy with, and obviously that's so close to a first that I think that was kind of my driving force for the next year, because I was so close to that first that I'd be really annoyed at myself if I didn't get it, and if I'd finished with an average of 69 and I'd been that close, like 1 point off, not quite made it. So third year for me was like this massive push to get that first. I moved out of that flat. Juliet wanted to live with her boyfriend for third year, and Amy wanted to move back in with her halls housemates, so I had to find a new group, and I found another group of mostly maths people, and we had an actual house, which made such a nice change. I mean, I was actually on the ground floor, so I didn't really feel the benefits of having 2 levels, but It just felt a lot more homely. It wasn't just rooms along a corridor. If you're familiar with Southampton at all, we were in kind of the St Denis area. It was about 20 minutes from uni. I didn't cycle that year though because it's a big steep hill up Church Lane. I would not cycle up Church Lane. I can hardly walk up Church Lane. If you've been here since third year, you'll know that we had this cat called Tommy who basically adopted us. He decided that he wanted to live in our house. And I think all 3 of my housemates were allergic to cats. I miss him and I hope he's okay. Academically for third year, like I said, I was so motivated. I really, really wanted to get that first. I don't know where this sudden force of energy came from because I did not have it before, but it just suddenly appeared. And I was ready. I was just ready to learn. I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to really engage with the content and understand everything. So the way I interacted with the stuff we were learning in third year was such a change. It made such a difference as well. I could really truly understand things. Like before I understood it, but this was a whole new level of understanding. I worked through literally every piece of material that we were given on our course. Any questions we were given, any like exercise sheets, I did them. At this point they were all optional. They were just there for you to be able to learn rather than being graded, but I did every single one of those. I tried all the proofs which were left as exercises. I literally engaged with everything. Surprise, surprise, the more you engage with stuff, the more it goes in. And I really felt that I'd somehow made this breakthrough and suddenly it just all made sense to me. The one thing in first semester that I didn't like was that we had this compulsory dissertation type module. It wasn't a dissertation, it was called Communicating and Researching Mathematics, doing a presentation on a specific subject and then writing what was essentially a dissertation. They won't call it that. And I've been like, oh, I didn't write a dissertation, I did a shorter version. But then actually, when I look at my word count compared to other people who do real dissertations, they're pretty similar. I'm kind of glad that that wasn't that heavily weighted because it was my lowest mark for the whole of third year. There were a list of topics and you could choose ones which you thought sounded interesting, but then you were just randomly assigned one of the ones that you'd chosen. If I'd had the option, I probably wouldn't have done it. And actually, I don't think they do have to do it anymore. I think it's an optional thing now, which is good. So that did drag my grade down a bit and I ended semester 1 with an average of 69.5. So I was so close to that first, but because obviously third year is weighted double what second year is, at the moment I was on an average of 69.25, so it would have rounded down. So the second semester was this final push and I really enjoyed that last semester. I chose some really good modules, I think. As I said, I was super engaged in the content, really taking things in and fully understanding them more than I ever had before. But there was a slightly minor hiccup in the fact that basically the whole of semester 2 was written off because of the lecturers striking. The strikes started in February, so I had a couple of weeks of teaching which were normal, and then one of my lecturers was completely on strike, not replying to emails, not doing anything. We didn't have any contact with him, so that module was interesting. Luckily, the lecturer was kind enough to change the way he did the exam so that it was only on the content that we'd covered up to a certain point, so it didn't end up affecting me too much. But I know a lot of people did get really badly affected by it because they just had to teach themselves and they paid this £9,000 and were doing it all themselves. I also did a beginner's French module for second semester because I thought like it's my last opportunity to be able to do something like that, and I've technically already paid for it because I've paid my tuition fees. So I did a bit of research and I found out that I could take this beginner's French. It was called French 1A, very basic stuff. If you do French 1A and 1B, that's equivalent to a GCSE, I think. So my level of French is very basic, what you learn in year 7 and 8. But that's fine. I'm really happy that I did it. I'm really happy with how I did in it. And I really enjoyed it. I really liked being able to learn a language again. For second semester, I got 78, which I was so pleased with. For third year overall, it was 74, I think. And then my total grade was a 72-ish. So a first, I got my first. I was so pleased. When the results came in, I was sitting on my bed just there and I was on my own and I just had a little cry to myself because uni has been an experience. I've been through a lot. I've changed a lot, I've grown a lot, and I've worked so hard. Thinking back to college, it doesn't seem that long ago at all, but when I look at myself at college, even though I was in a very happy place, I've grown so much since then, despite everything. The world has changed so much since I started uni as well. Like when I started uni, Brexit wasn't a thing. I didn't even know what Brexit meant. Trump wasn't president. David Cameron hadn't even put his dick in a pig yet. I think if I'd made this video coming from like the mental place that I was in after second year, it wouldn't have been so positive. I don't know whether I'd have said like, yeah, I'm really glad I went to uni. But now I'm so glad I went. I'm so glad that I just stuck it out despite everything that was going on. The only regret I guess I do have is that I had the attitude that I had in third year in second year. I still got my first, and like even if I'd worked harder I'd have still got a first, so it doesn't really matter that much. I think I could have actually retained the information a lot better. I know there are some people out there that are interested in the maths side of things, so if you would like a video talking about the actual modules I did, what we learned, how I did in them, then it's definitely something I would consider, but I know it's not for everybody, so if it's not for you, then please don't feel like you have to watch it. I'm considering doing it, so if you would like to see that, let me know. Thank you for watching this video and sticking through the rambles and the tears and all the blurry footage in the middle. That's all from me for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.